did her best, but as the night dragged on, it became clear that Chika was in trouble. As dawn broke, the midwife finally managed to deliver the baby, but Chika was weak and unresponsive. Obinna stood by, holding his newborn son, a mix of pride and fear in his eyes. He had gotten his way, but at what cost? Chika lay unconscious, her breathing shallow, as the midwife urged Obinna to call a doctor. Obinna Okeke was known as a wealthy but stingy businessman. He owned several businesses in the region, and his financial success was evident in his grand mansion and luxurious cars. Yet, despite his riches, Obinna had a peculiar trait that earned him the nickname Okwu Ego, a man who never spent money without measuring every single kobo. His wife, Chika, was 7 months pregnant, and it was only after much pleading that he agreed to spend money on prenatal care. He often told her that a woman's duty is to the home, not to doctors. Chika had married Obinna after 4 years of courtship. She was desperate, as she was nearing her 40s, and no suitors had come for her hand. Her parents had warned her that Emeka was not an ideal husband, as he exhibited signs of jealousy and possessiveness. They told her of his peculiar ways, but Chika was determined to get married before hitting menopause. She had been his secretary, and over time, Obinna's attention had shifted toward her. When they started dating, he seemed charming, showering her with gifts and attention. However, things took an unexpected turn one morning that sealed the future of their relationship. Chika, feeling the pressure of time slipping away, had taken matters into her own hands. On the morning of her 38th birthday, she arrived at the office extra early, her heart pounding with nervous anticipation. She had carefully planned the moment for weeks, hoping it would secure the commitment she so desperately wanted from Obinna. The small, simple office where they worked together had been transformed for the occasion. Chika had arranged for the office to be filled with bouquets of roses, lilies, and orchids, their delicate petals adding a warmth and romance that contrasted with the usual sterile, businesslike environment. Obinna arrived at the office as usual, wearing his crisp, tailored suit and carrying his briefcase, oblivious to the surprise waiting for him. As he stepped into the office, his eyes widened in shock. The sight of flowers everywhere was completely out of character for the strict, no-nonsense environment he had cultivated. His first thought was that something had gone wrong. Perhaps one of their clients had sent a large gift by mistake. But then, he saw Chika standing in the center of the room, holding a small box in her trembling hands. "Obinna," Chika began softly, her voice filled with emotion. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart raced as she slowly knelt down on one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple silver band. Obinna stared at her, completely bewildered. "Will you marry me?" she asked, her eyes shining with hope and uncertainty. For a moment, Obinna was silent, his expression unreadable. He had never expected this, Chika, his secretary, proposing to him. But more than that, he had never considered marriage as something that needed urgency. Yet, as he stood there, surrounded by flowers and staring at the woman who had become such an integral part of his life, a part of him softened. After what felt like an eternity, Obinna finally smiled, a rare, genuine smile. He took the ring from the box, nodded, and simply said, "Yes, Chika, I will marry you." Chika's heart soared with joy. She had taken a bold risk, and it had paid off. Little did she know, however, that this would be the beginning of a life with Obinna that would be far from the fairy tale she imagined on that flower-filled morning. The man she had proposed to would soon reveal the full extent of his controlling nature, and her life as his wife would become one of submission, stifled dreams, and endless restrictions. He kept strict control over the household finances, measuring every bit of food they consumed. Every visitor had to be approved by him, and he forbade Chika from working under any male boss, despite her career aspirations. He feared that any interaction with another man could lead to something improper. Obinna's controlling behavior worsened as Chika's pregnancy advanced. He was particularly bothered by the idea that one evening, as Chika was preparing for the arrival of their child, Obinna called her into his study. His voice was calm, yet firm. "When it's time for you to deliver, I don't want any male doctor touching you," he said. "You are mine. I paid your dowry, and I won't have another man seeing what belongs to me." Chika was shocked. She had never imagined that Obinna's jealousy would extend to this level. She tried to reason with him, but it was clear that he had made up his mind. The day Chika had been anxiously awaiting finally arrived. Late one evening, she began to feel the contractions. Obinna rushed her to the hospital, driving his car at breakneck speed through the streets of their town. Upon arriving at the hospital, Chika was immediately taken to the maternity ward. The doctor on duty, a male gynecologist, arrived to attend to her. As soon as Obinna saw the doctor, his temper flared. "Is there no female doctor here?" he demanded. The nurse tried to calm him, explaining that the hospital's only available doctor at the moment was the male gynecologist. But Obinna wouldn't have it. "My wife will not be attended to by a man," he shouted. Without waiting for an answer, he stormed into the maternity ward and dragged Chika out of bed despite her protests and her obvious pain. Obinna drove Chika to several other hospitals that night, but every time he found out that a male doctor would be assisting, he refused to let her stay. Chika was exhausted, her contractions coming closer together, and she begged Obinna to allow her to stay at the hospital. "Please, Obinna, let them help me. I'm in so much pain," she cried. But his mind was made up. As they arrived at another hospital, Obinna inquired again about the doctor. Once more, it was a male gynecologist on duty. Frustrated and enraged, he turned to Chika. "We're going home," he said firmly. Chika, barely able to stand, was helpless. She had no choice but to obey. As they drove home, Chika's heart filled with dread. She knew that giving birth at home without proper medical attention was dangerous, but Obinna's jealousy left no room for logic. Back at their mansion, Chika's condition worsened. Her contractions were unbearable, and Obinna stood by, watching her with a mixture of anxiety and possessiveness. He had called a local midwife, who arrived with minimal supplies. She was nervous, knowing that Chika's labor was far advanced, and that this was not a job she was fully prepared to handle. But Obinna refused to let anyone else come near his wife. He paced the room, biting his lip as Chika's cries filled the night air. Chika's mind wandered to the warnings her parents had given her. They had told her that Obinna was too controlling, but she had been too desperate to listen. Now, she was facing the consequences of her choice, and she feared for the safety of her unborn child. The midwife did her best, but as the night dragged on, it became clear that Chika was in trouble. As dawn broke, the midwife finally managed to deliver the baby, but Chika was weak and unresponsive. Obinna stood by, holding his newborn son, a mix of pride and fear in his eyes. He had gotten his way, but at what cost? Chika lay unconscious, her breathing shallow, as the midwife urged Obinna to call a doctor. But even in the face of his wife's peril, Obinna hesitated. His pride, his jealousy, and his misguided sense of ownership had blinded him to the reality of the situation. As Obinna stared at his wife's fragile form, a creeping realization began to dawn on him. In his quest to control everything, he may have lost the most important thing in his life. Obinna stood in the dimly lit room, his mind racing. The midwife's pleading look didn't escape him, yet he remained paralyzed by his own stubbornness. Chika, his wife, the woman he claimed to love, the mother of his newborn son, lay lifelessly on the bed. Her breaths were shallow, her complexion pale. Obinna's heart pounded, but he was torn. He couldn't bear the thought of a male doctor seeing his wife, even in her vulnerable state. But as the seconds ticked by, the severity of the situation began to break through his clouded judgment. "Call the doctor or she'll die," the midwife whispered urgently. Obinna finally snapped out of his daze and dialed the number of the hospital where they had first gone that night. When the male doctor arrived, it was too late. The doctor rushed into the room, his hands moving swiftly as he examined Chika. But his face soon fell. He looked at Obinna with a mixture of pity and frustration. "Why did you wait so long?" the doctor asked. There was no accusation in his tone, only a quiet disappointment. Obinna couldn't respond. His throat felt tight as he watched the doctor make futile attempts to revive his wife. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. The baby, swaddled in the midwife's arms, cried faintly in the background. Obinna stood motionless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Chika, his wife, his possession, was gone. She had died from complications that could have easily been avoided if only he had allowed proper medical care. But his jealousy and need for control had cost him everything. Chika's funeral was a somber affair. Her family was devastated, especially her parents, who had long feared this outcome. They had warned Chika repeatedly about Obinna, but she hadn't listened. Now she was gone, leaving behind a newborn son who would never know his mother's warmth. Obinna was racked with guilt, but his pride kept him from showing it. He stood at the graveside, holding his son, trying to maintain a composed face. But inside, he was tormented. He had insisted on controlling every aspect of his wife's life, from what she ate to who she could speak to. Now that control had spiraled into a tragedy that could never be undone. After the funeral, Obinna returned home to an empty house. The baby's cries echoed through the halls, a constant reminder of what he had lost. For the first time, Obinna began to reflect on his actions. He thought about all the times he had stifled Chika's desires, her ambitions, and her basic human needs because of his own insecurities. He realized that he had been consumed by his fear of losing control, and in the end, that fear had led to his greatest loss. In the following weeks, Obinna became a shell of himself. He no longer measured the food or restricted the visitors. Instead, he lived in isolation, haunted by his mistakes. The baby, now cared for by a nanny, grew each day, but Obinna found it difficult to bond with him. Every time he looked at his son, he was reminded of Chika's final moments and the choices that had led to her death. Obinna Okeke's story is a cautionary tale of how jealousy, control, and possessiveness can destroy even the most sacred relationships. His obsession with ownership, fueled by cultural expectations and personal insecurities, led to the untimely death of his wife, Chika, who had once believed that marrying him was the answer to her future. The tragedy of Chika's death lies not only in Obinna's refusal to allow a male doctor to care for her, but also in the deeper issues of mistrust and control that had plagued their marriage from the start. Obinna's jealousy was rooted in his belief that he had paid for Chika through dowry, seeing her as a possession rather than an equal partner. His refusal to let her live freely, to make choices, and to receive care when she needed it most ultimately led to her demise.